He sat in the back of the train car, watching Belgium disappear behind him. Alfred von Schlieffen had just explained his plan to the General Staff. It would take 42 days. Paris would fall before Russia could mobilize. The German Empire would never fight a war on two fronts. He believed this completely. He had built an entire architectural structure out of railroad schedules and regimental movement orders. It was the most detailed military plan ever committed to paper. Schlieffen understood that Germany's geography meant strangulation. France to the west, Russia to the east. The Kaiser's empire sat between two powers that would crush it if given time. So the answer was not to give them time. Strike France so quickly and so completely that the war in the West would be finished before the Eastern Colossus could even lumber into motion. It was logical. It was elegant. It was based on a single assumption that would later prove catastrophic. The plan required 7/8 of Germany's field army to sweep through Belgium in a vast wheeling motion. The right wing would be overwhelmingly strong. It would push through neutral territory, cross into northern France, and curl around Paris from the west. The French armies, Schlieffen calculated, would rush forward into Alsace-Lorraine to reclaim the provinces lost in 1871. They would charge straight into a trap, while they battered themselves against reinforced German defenses in the south. The massive right wing would envelop them from behind. The French army would be caught in a closing fist. It would be destroyed within 6 weeks. Then the trains would carry those same German divisions east to face Russia. One war, not two. Sequential, not simultaneous. Schlieffen died in 1913. His last words, according to those who were present, were about the right wing. Keep it strong, he said. Do not weaken the right wing. Helmuth von Moltke inherited the plan. He was the nephew of the elder Moltke, the architect of Prussia's victories in the 1860s. The nephew was thoughtful, nervous, cautious in a way his uncle had never been. He looked at Schlieffen's blueprint and saw problems immediately. The plan violated Belgian neutrality, which would likely bring Britain into the war. It left Germany's border with France dangerously thin. If the French did not behave as predicted, if they attacked in the south with more force than anticipated, the weakened German left wing might collapse. Moltke adjusted. He moved troops from the right wing to the left. He reinforced Alsace-Lorraine. He softened the edges of Schlieffen's geometric certainty. In August 1914, the machine began to move. Germany declared war on France and sent an ultimatum to Belgium. The Belgians refused passage. German troops crossed the border anyway. The fortresses at Liège were supposed to fall immediately. They did not. Belgian resistance was stronger than German intelligence had suggested. Artillery had to be brought forward. Heavy siege guns reduced the forts one by one. But time was slipping. The railroad schedules that governed everything were already behind. Schlieffen's plan had been built with railroad precision. Every division had a timetable. Every supply column had a window. Delays cascaded. What was supposed to take days took weeks. The German right wing pushed into France. It was still immensely powerful. French and British forces fell back. There was a kind of terrible momentum to the advance. German soldiers marched until their boots disintegrated. They moved faster than their supply columns could follow. Horses collapsed. Ammunition ran short. The men kept walking. Paris seemed within reach. The French government prepared to evaluate. German cavalry patrols got close enough to see the Eiffel Tower. Then the unexpected happened. French intelligence had intercepted German radio transmissions. The messages were sent in the clear, without encryption. German units were exhausted. Their lines of communication were stretched. The right wing, once overwhelming, had been weakened by detachments sent to besiege Antwerp and by divisions pulled east to reinforce Prussia against an earlier-than-expected Russian advance. The French commander, Joseph Joffre, saw the gap. The German First Army under Alexander von Kluck had wheeled too early. Instead of curling west around Paris, it turned southeast to chase retreating French forces. It exposed its right flank. The Germans were now passing east of Paris, not west. The sweeping encirclement Schlieffen had envisioned would not happen. Joffre pulled together what he could. French forces in Paris, forces retreating from the north, forces scraped from other sectors. The British Expeditionary Force, exhausted but still intact, was ordered to turn and fight. On September 6, 1914, they attacked the German flank along the Marne River. Von Kluck had to stop his advance and wheel his army back to the west to meet the threat. This created a gap between his First Army and Karl von Bülow's Second Army. The gap was 30 miles wide. French and British forces poured into it. Moltke sat in Luxembourg, far behind the front. He received fragmented reports. Units out of contact. Contradictions. Uncertainty. He sent a staff officer, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hench, forward to assess the situation. Hench had no command authority. He was an observer. But when he reached Bülow's headquarters, he found panic. Bülow believed his Second Army was about to be encircled. He wanted to retreat. Hench saw the gap. He understood that if Bülow pulled back and Kluck did not, the First Army would be isolated and destroyed. He told Bülow to withdraw. Then he drove north to Kluck's headquarters and delivered the same message. Kluck protested. His forces were still fighting. The enemy was exhausted. Victory might still be possible. But Hench insisted. The Second Army was already retreating. If the First Army stayed, it would die alone. Kluck gave the order. The German armies pulled back from the Marne. They retreated to the Aisne River and dug in. The sweeping offensive had stopped. Schlieffen's 42 days had passed. Paris had not fallen. The French army had not been destroyed. Russia was fully mobilized and advancing into East Prussia. Germany was now fighting the two-front war it had designed an entire strategy to avoid. What followed was not what anyone had imagined. Both sides tried to outflank each other to the north. This became known as the race to the sea. Each attempt to go around the enemy's line failed because the enemy extended their line to match. Trenches reached the English Channel. The Western Front solidified into a continuous line of fortifications stretching from Switzerland to the North Sea. For years of attrition warfare began. Millions of men would die fighting over miles of mud. Historians have spent more than a century dissecting the failure of the Schlieffen Plan. Some blame Moltke for weakening the right wing. Some blame Kluck for turning too early. Some blame Hench for ordering a retreat that might not have been necessary. Some point to Belgian resistance, to British intervention, to Russian speed, to French resilience. But the deeper failure was in the plan's original premise. Schlieffen had assumed that war could be controlled through precision, that human exhaustion, confusion, fear, and miscommunication could be managed through detailed scheduling, that the enemy would behave predictably, that fog and friction would not matter if the design was thorough enough. He had built a machine that required perfection. Any deviation, any delay, any unexpected resistance would throw the entire mechanism out of alignment. And war is made of deviations. Fortresses that do not fall on schedule. Soldiers who march slower than calculated. Commanders who make decisions based on incomplete information and rising panic. Schlieffen's plan was not wrong in its logic. It was wrong in its certainty. It assumed a controllable environment that did not exist. Moltke suffered a nervous collapse in September 1914. He was quietly removed from command. He never spoke publicly about the Marne. He died in 1916. Broken and largely forgotten, Schlieffen became a ghost that haunted German military planning for decades. The myth grew that his plan had been perfect, that it would have worked if only Moltke had not changed it, if only the right wing had been kept strong. This myth was useful. It allowed German officers to believe that they had not lost the war through strategic miscalculation but through a failure of nerve, a deviation from the true path. But the plan was never perfect. It could not have been. It was built on an assumption that speed and force could substitute for adaptability. That overwhelming initial success would prevent the war from becoming the kind of grinding, stalemated nightmare it became. Germany's greatest strategic choice was to believe that war could be won through a single, precisely executed blow. When that blow did not land, there was no second plan. The choice that was supposed to deliver victory through certainty delivered collapse through rigidity. The German Empire spent the next 4 years trying to win a war it had already lost in September 1914. Not lost on the battlefield, but lost in conception. The two-front war that Schlieffen's plan was designed to prevent became reality. The quick victory that was supposed to justify the violation of Belgian neutrality never came. Britain entered the war, bringing its empire and its naval blockade. The United States would eventually follow. Germany's strategy had been to avoid fighting everyone at once. The execution of that strategy ensured that Germany ended up fighting everyone at once. Schlieffen had once said that the modern battlefield was a terrible place to be. He believed the answer was not to accept the conditions of modern war but to escape them through operational brilliance, to end the war before it could become modern. His plan was an attempt to win a 19th century war of maneuver in a 20th century environment. When it failed, there was no remaining illusion. The war became exactly what he had feared: industrial, static, unwinnable through tactical genius alone. There is a moment preserved in the historical record that captures something essential about what happened. In the first days of September 1914, as the German armies wheeled toward Paris, a German aviator flew reconnaissance over the French lines. He reported back that he could see dust clouds from massive troop movements. French forces were shifting. They were not retreating in disorder. They were repositioning with purpose. The report reached German headquarters. It was noted. But by then, the momentum of the advance was so powerful that stopping or adjusting seemed impossible. The machine was in motion. To halt it would have required admitting that the plan itself might be wrong. So the advance continued into the trap that was forming. The choice was not made in a single moment. It was made over decades. In staff colleges and war games. In conference rooms where maps were studied and railroad timetables calculated. It was made in the belief that modern war could be controlled, that industrial power and organizational precision could overcome friction and chance. Schlieffen designed a plan that could not survive contact with reality. Moltke inherited it and could not escape it. The German army executed it and could not adapt when it failed. And millions of young men died in trenches because a strategy built on certainty met a world that had none.